So today's conversation is with a breeder who's just getting started out, but who I think has started in the correct way. He started small. He has the goal of raising his chameleons individually, and he clearly cares about the quality of their life, and the work that he puts in is phenomenal. So we've had conversations with people who are some of the founding members of our community. We have some people in the intermediate level, and today's conversation with somebody who's just getting started, but who I believe deserves your support and who's hopefully going to contribute a lot to the hobby in the years to come. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Michael DiBoneventura. This is Iperdalis. So welcome, Michael.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I'm really excited to have you on to the podcast today to talk about your experience as a breeder, getting started and we have a number of different topics that we're trying to cover. And what I really hope that this episode can help people understand is like the perspective of a breeder who's getting started and is coming to a lot of these questions about selective breeding and genetics with a fresh perspective and trying to gather, as much information as you can with that first group, that first generation, your first holdbacks, all the stuff as you get started. And so I think it'd be great just to hear from you how you got started and where you are right now.
Well, I got started with reptiles way back when I was a kid. My parents got me my first one when I was 7 or 8, and then I just went down the rabbit hole from there. And I always wanted to get into panthers way back, but it was just it wasn't feasible back then. Everything that I was hearing about them kind of scared me away from them.
Yeah.
They weren't super available around me. I don't even know if they were available for a while. They would never in the stores. I'd only see them online, and I always wanted to get one. And then about three or 4 years ago, I finally got to a point where I could have them. I had the space to do it. And then as soon as I got my first one, I just wanted to start breeding them and start working from there.
What were some of those challenges back when you decided against it?
You always heard about how tough they were, how complicated they were. The whole thing that they absolutely need a screen cage really scared me off because I just knew that there was no way that I could keep the parameters that they required in a screen cage.
Yeah.
At that point. And it seemed like everyone was doing that. There was no one messing around with hybrids or glass cages or anything like that back then. So I just stayed away. And then once I found out that you could go that direction, it just became more feasible to do in my situation now.
Yeah, where are you located?
I'm in Central Mass, so we get those. It's real cold in the winter, and then once summer comes around, it's hot and humid. So I really get we get the just a real wide range of everything. So that adds
so you're like screen cage in the middle of February sounds terrible.
Yeah, and with me it's even worse because I keep everything in my basement, and it's technically it's an unfinished basement, which I feel helps me and hurts me in different aspects. It's nice at night because if I shut off my dehumidifier down there, I can get that nighttime humidity to go up, and then I use like a hybrid cage now, so it just really, once I shut that off when I do my misting and fogging at night, it just everything stays right in there. So
That's awesome.
it works out. It's a little challenging when it's like the dead of winter and it's 5 below out.
And,
It's
and and what do
have
you
to run
do
a
for
little.
what do you do for ventilation down there?
I do. I luck out once I get the dehumidifier going. I run a few fans, keep the air from getting stagnant. I try to open the basement door up top, kind of let some of that come out occasionally. In the summer, I'll open the windows up down there as much as I can. Usually at night, and it helps me get that real solid nighttime drop that I like and
Mm-hmm.
that they like.
Cool. What temperatures are you shooting for at night? I know there's a debate about that.
I like to, if I can, I find that in like the fall and early winter, I find that they really like it if I can get it down into like the high 60s.
Yeah.
I don't have any problem down there. I've had some nights down in my basement where it gets into the low 60s, and they've been perfectly fine, and they actually seem like they're sleeping better when they're like that. And then as
Yeah.
soon as the lights come on, they come right back. So
They go and bask and they're fine.
yep.
Yeah. I keep mine outside until the lows drop below 45.
Oh, someone
So,
someone once told me that as long as you're not seeing your breath, then they're okay.
yeah,
I don't
I
know.
saw
I
my
don't
breath
know.
today. I saw my breath today though. So I don't know if that's a good rule, you know. But yeah, no, I guess cool, man. That's awesome. I'm glad that you were able to get started. And I'll say from my perspective, watching you get started, I've seen a lot of people do it in a way that's kind of I feel for them. Like I can see that they're getting in over their head. I can see that they're kind of getting spread thin. And a lot of people just they get so excited, and that energy results in growth beyond their infrastructure, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I thought that was really cool about you is from the beginning you had the intention to go for individual caging. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I wanted to give them the best start that I could, and as soon as I started hearing people like you and Bill Strand and everyone talking about individual raising, just how by the time you get to, they get to be 3 months old, a lot of people are mistaking yours as being a lot older, and it just to me it just seems like the right way. I mean, they really don't like people,
Being
and
together and
they don't really like anything being around them.
yeah.
And so for me to just kind of set them up in their own little area, leave them alone, let them do their thing, I think it really allows them to thrive when you're doing that. There's
Did,
absolutely no competition for them at all. So they're just living their best life from day one.
yep.
And then
And then you're like, hey, I have a 3-month old chameleon ready to go, and everyone's like, that's 5 months. What's wrong with you?
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. They is that? Did you have that experience where people were
with
like, oh, you,
with a few people when I dropped them off, they were like, "Oh, I didn't think they were going to be this big," or they're used to seeing everyone else on the online forums and people trying to do it, and it's like, yeah, I mean, you got to go look at the background of the panther that you're buying.
yeah,
If it's sitting in a tote with 10 or 12 other siblings, I mean, they're it's constantly fighting for everything. He's fighting for his
yep.
UVB. He's fighting for his food, his moisture, everything.
Immune system is depressed.
Yep.
Yep, yep. There's all sorts of risks associated with it. So I'm glad that you had a good experience. Um, how about the species? Like the species itself? What's some of the stuff about Pardalis specifically that you find really interesting?
I love the like all the colors you can get. I mean, you can get any sort of a color palette that you want with them. Really, I mean, depending on which locale you go for. I mean, you can get something that's salt, like just bright yellow. You can get something that's bright blue, or like the purples, the rainbow color. I mean, there's just no other. To me, there's no other reptile that gives you that palette.
Yeah,
That
absolutely.
it's just there, and it's just amazing that somewhere in the world they're just roaming around in the trees like that. It's just mind blowing.
Yeah.
Just the color palettes and
Yeah, I really don't think there is another species that spans the color spectrum the way that panthers do. I mean, it is really cool.
yeah.
So I totally agree. The other thing that I find really interesting about them is that they are not easy to breed. So not easy in the sense that like you're always 50% blind, right? So
Mm-hmm.
every pairing you do, you're like, I don't know what's in the female
Yep.
and so can you talk to me a little bit about that? Like how do you think about females from a selective breeding standpoint?
With the females, I really like to. I I I only like to buy from places where I can see everything that's in her background, just
Mm-hmm.
to try to limit some of the variables. Like I like all the males in her background to kind of look the same. I look for, you know, I don't want her to be the tiniest little female out there. I like her to be a good size. I like
Mm-hmm.
to look back if I can, if it's provided, like how big her clutch sizes are, if they're very consistent in size. I don't, for me necessarily, I don't want a female that's having huge clutches of eggs. You know, I like to look for the females that are having like the average size, like between like
20 to 30.
yeah, somewhere in there, even a little less doesn't, like a 17, 18, something like that. But I don't necessarily want to see the females that are pumping out those 30 egg clutches, because
40.
I don't think it's just it's not real healthy for them. The
Yeah.
the bigger the clutches, the longer recovery times I see, the more you can run into stuff with all your like the vitamin deficiencies. It really just takes a toll on
Mm-hmm.
them.
And
Um,
how much of that do you see as a genetic thing, and how much of it do you see as a husbandry thing?
I think for the most part, I think most of it is a husbandry thing. I think people just like to stuff them full of food because they kind of go on that mentality of like the family dog, like kind of got to feed it like
Yeah.
twice a day, once in the morning, once at night, and it's all the same. So people just they I feel like they have a hard time with the reptiles where they're like, no, like it doesn't need food this day, or
Yeah.
it only needs, a small handful of feeders each day, 4 or 5 crickets, or, a big dubia or something like, they don't need to be packed. And I think a lot of people just do that for just the clutch size. With the
So
amount of time that you have to invest with them hatching, I feel like some people just want to really pump it out. And
yeah.
if they can get to 30 of them, then that's what they're going to do.
Yeah. So you're primarily looking at that number as a judgment of husbandry, right? Like
Yeah.
kind of uh, screening out the people that are not providing great care for
Yeah.
their females.
Mm-hmm.
How many people publish their clutch sizes?
I haven't found that. I think you might be the only one that I see where you're posting up how many how many are laid, how many are hatching, and all
The
that. Because
dates.
I all the like the date ranges when they start hatching, when it ends. I mean, there's not really that many people.
Yeah. It's kind of, well, it is also kind of scary to do that, right? Because I publish my mistakes, right?
Mhm.
Like I get questions from people all the time where they are like, why did only 4 eggs hatch from this clutch? I was like, I didn't dig them up fast enough, like,
Yeah,
or like that was that female's 7th clutch and I retired her after that, you know, um, like I get these questions and sometimes people, they dig into those numbers and they make assumptions without even asking you, right? So then I think part of the reason that there is some fear about being transparent is like people are worried about how do you answer those questions, and I answer it point blank. I just like yeah, I didn't dig them up fast enough. I had a really busy week, or
Mm-hmm.
whatever the thing is, and I I think that that's probably a good thing. Like I remember, what do you think about some of that information for people who are considering something like an egg purchase? Do you think that it could help them understand the what the hatch rate actually is?
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I think people really need to be educated more on that because I don't think it's ever the right answer for someone who's just getting into keeping. I mean, if you get the egg, you hatch it, you get it to survive. That's awesome. I'm happy for you. It's a great community to be in. They're great animals, but
Yeah,
I it's one of those practices I don't agree with it at all.
yeah,
It it's 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 putting all the risk on the person that's buying the egg as opposed to the breeder who
taking
should be
responsibility for what they're doing.
taking responsibility for what you do. I mean, and anyone can put two animals together, get some eggs, hold them for a month or so, see which ones
Look fertile or not? Yeah,
didn't come out fertile or anything, and then just pack it up in a cup and send it off, and just be like, hey, if it doesn't hatch, get a hold of me and 10 months and I'll either, I'll send you another egg or I'll give you a discount off of a well started juvenile that you should have gone that route anyway. So you're just giving this unethical breeder more money in the end, more money and
yeah.
more of your time.
And generally they're not well started juveniles. They're like little hatchlings that they get in replacement. I've seen them. It's at least from my perspective, they're they're about a quarter of the size of my 3 month olds.
Mm-hmm.
Is what I've seen sent out as replacements, and then and I guess in all fairness, that was the standard before individual raising became a common practice. So like the you know I'm not blaming them for it. It's just that they're behind on a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
Whether so, um, what about how do you think about your female from a selective breeding standpoint? So like, how do you what kind of information do you look for to eh, make a decision to pair her with a given male that you have, for example?
Well, I mean, obviously, I like her side, like the male on her side to look as close to the male on my side as I can, because
Yep.
obviously she's going to have a fair amount of the makeup of whatever the babies come out looking like. So I always try to pair off of stuff that looks very similar, and it kind of narrows down the window of what you're going to get. I mean, you're still going to have those outliers,
Mm-hmm.
especially in the beginning of a project. The longer you work on it, the more you can kind of narrow it down. But in the
Yeah.
beginning, I like all the males on her side to look like mine. Um,
Yeah. And then how do you narrow it down? How do you narrow it down over time? What do you think what's the process for that?
for
You haven't
the
gotten have you gotten there yet? Is that a too early question or
Yeah, that's kind of. I only right now. I only have one female that I held back from my current one, and what stuck out to me was just the amount of like red that she had in her body. And I mean, this was all going back. I kind of put her aside when she was at that 3.5, 4 month mark. She just kind of,
she stood out?
yeah, she just looked. I mean, for as fired up as I could get her to look. I mean, I just saw the reds, the oranges, and I was like,
Mm-hmm.
yep, I want to keep you aside.
Yeah, the way I generally think about that is a pretty female will help sell the babies. period.
Mhm.
So like, if she's pretty, then there's a chance that her daughters will be pretty. And if that's true, then those females, which is the most difficult part of breeding, will be more attractive just by themselves, regardless of what traits they carry. So um, I've always thought of it that way. Like, a pretty female is a good bet, just because she might have pretty daughters. And um, there's also something that I find really interesting, where say you've got a female that's got red or orange, like the one you produced,
Mhm.
and then once she breeds and you've seen all of her siblings, or sorry, all of her children, seen some of those males color up, the next generation after that, when you see females, so say you breed one of her brothers and you're trying to select females from that group that look like the brother, or sorry, one of her sons. So say you you have one of her sons as a holdback in the next generation. You raised her, you selected her given that she had a lot of red.
Mhm.
And then you want to get a female at that 2 generation out mark, the daughters of the male that you held back from that female. What you can do, and what I've done, is you can look for females that resemble their grandmother, right? Because you've seen
Yeah.
her grow up. You know you know what traits she had, and the way that you can try to figure out which females are going to carry the traits that that male had. You know what his mother looked like, right?
Mhm.
And so as you gain that multi-generational knowledge, you can estimate what's in a given female as you go. It's a rough science, and it's not like guaranteed, but um, it's more information than anybody else has.
Yeah.
and and so that's one thing I think is kind of cool, is like when you see a female trait, now skip down a generation, and you know that it came via a male of another of that female that you're looking at, like the grandmother. Um, that's at least one proxy method that I've tried out, um, and it works pretty well. Like if you look at the Papa line, Papa
Mhm.
Mavo, a lot of the females from that all resemble Sunny, and Sunny was Papa Fee's mother. So like Vosari and all those, the way I picked those females off of Papa Fee was because I knew what Sunny looked like, and so I was selecting females from Papa Fee that looked like Sunny, because I was like, that produced an amazing chameleon.
Yeah. I think one of the females I have downstairs is from Papa Fee.
Yeah. Did
Yeah.
she have orange? Does she have some orange on her?
She has a lot of purple in her.
Oh, okay.
She's very, very, very purple
Okay.
once she gets fired up.
We'll see. We'll see. Maybe you can prove me wrong with that. If it's yeah, but cool, man. So how about once you have babies from a female, what do you do with that information? So you produced a clutch. Say you were going for a really red group,
Mhm.
and you didn't see too many reds, right? What if you saw a lot of rainbows, or maybe even some yellows? Um, well, how do you handle that from a selective breeding standpoint?
I would, I mean, with that, if it's one of those situations where if if I'm looking for all red and I don't get it off of that combination, then I'm probably just going to move most of them on and go back and kind of just reassess the whole thing. Probably end up looking for a new female to get with the male, depending on his age, as long as he's not too old to keep going. And
To like restart?
I would just, as much as I would hate to say it, I would almost restart the project
Mm-hmm.
so I could get a good baseline, or as good of a baseline as I can with what I'm looking for. Because if it's not in there, then to me, and this is just on a real basic level, that it wouldn't. There would be no reason for me to continue the line if I'm looking for all reds and they're coming out yellows and, like you said, the rainbows and all that. Because
because it's not red.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then how do you sell them too? How do you communicate that to a customer?
At that point, I kind of just let them know is if you can't see the direction that they're going, like really like 100% to be able to pass that along, I kind of just tell them it's for some
It's a
of
rainbow.
it's just going to be a rainbow. It's
Yeah, it's ambelobe. I don't know.
I can't guarantee it, one way or another what it's going to do. And I mean, rainbows are still pretty. It's just
Yeah. No, and I there's actually a lot of people who come to the locale for that specifically, right? So
Mhm.
when you say it's a rainbow, there's a group of people out there like, great, I wanted it because it's ambelobe rainbow, cool, So that to me, I think is important. Is basically just being straight with people, because often you end up realizing that the person is looking for that, right? So I could be going for yellow, but I hit on a red and I'm like, geez, I can't use that. And then I tell somebody like, hey, look, he's got a ton of red. He looks great. Maybe that's a good fit for them. Right.
Mhm.
Even though I missed on my goals and I feel like, oh, geez, like I don't know what I'm going to do with this. I feel like there's a place for everything. So as long as you just put it out there, like people will jump on it.
Mm-hmm. I told people with this last run, just because with the male that I have, I feel like he was kind of an outlier in his clutch. I actually had his half brother for a while, and they were just, I mean, they were nothing alike. They were my other guy. He was yellow and orange, and he breasted
different dom, right? Different
yes,
dom, or
different dom, same sire, and they were just. I mean, those two were completely different.
Yeah. I mean, I look at Manjaka groups. The Manjaka, 3 different females that I paired Manjaka to so far, they all look like Manjaka in some way, but they've been in very different. They're all very different. Like and I find that to be a lot of fun. Like you can really see the female's influence, because it's all the same sire, but different female, and you can get totally different outcomes. So it's pretty cool. So what do you think about it from a kind of we obviously we're going for reds or yellows or maybe even a rainbow, like you've got a really vibrant chameleon and you're going for rainbows. What do you think about the 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 phenotype where you see mixed lineage in an animal? Like what do you think you're going to get from that? So like you see red and yellow in a female side, but the sire is the color you want. Have you ever even considered that, or you just avoid it?
Usually I try to avoid it because it's just adding it's just adding more variables, and since I do everything on such a small scale, I try to limit as many variables as I can.
You don't want to be 2 years later and be like, geez, that's not what I wanted.
Yeah, I want to try to. I mean, I know it's probably not gonna happen. I feel like I'm gonna have more. I don't want to call them failures, but I feel like I'm gonna find a lot more of what I'm not looking for than what I am.
Mm-hmm.
At first, until I kind of start working everything. So I kind of like, I've seen a lot of females where, I mean, I like them, like people post up pictures of them, and to me, they're a real stunning female. They have a lot of color and everything, but then once I start kind of diving back into looking at pictures of whatever lineage they can provide me, usually I just shy away from it, and I try to.
So you're not one of those people who think that you can make it better over time. You could perfect. You could mine out the yellow part if that's what you want.
On some, I don't think it's. I think it would be a lot harder to go from getting something that has a lot of like the yellow belly in there, and then to get it just to be straight red. I feel like that's a long,
Process.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the analogy that I sometimes use is it's like mixing paint. So it's like if you got white paint, you mix red into it. The amount of white paint you're gonna have to mix in to get back to white is is not an equal number. It's like a lot more white paint. And you can't just go like one part white paint and get it back to white.
No.
Um, it just keeps going to another shade of pink, and
Yep.
and then you're like, geez, how long is it gonna take me to get back to white? That analogy I think is important for people to understand because it's the same for cross locales. So if people cross a locale, like how
Mhm.
long is it going to take you to get back to the look of a wild type animal? Same thing. It's going to take forever. You got to
Yeah.
keep going wild, 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 wild over and over again until you get that percentage to be like 90% one thing and 10% the other. And then finally it might look like the thing you're going for again.
Yeah.
So cool. Yeah, that's one question I see a lot. How about sometimes I see these posts of people who um, they got an animal, they wanted it to be yellow. The breeder purchased it from yellow lineage, yellow on both sides, but the animal doesn't look yellow. Um, and then like how do you deal with that? Or like what are some of the things you've seen people do with it?
Uh,
You're like, mine are all yellow. I don't know what you're talking about.
yeah. Uh, are you talking from like the customer aspect of it,
It
or
could be the
like
way that you talk about it. It could be like what they think they can accomplish with that animal. Because the one of the most common things I see from breeders that are getting started, and you're not one of them, is they get an animal from a yellow body, blue bar lineage,
Mhm.
and then it's a rainbow, and it doesn't have much yellow on it, and then they say that the babies could be yellow because
Mhm.
it's from yellow lineage, right? And it's like they have these babies and they're like they're yellow body blue bar, of course, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you start with a male that's looking like a rainbow, I mean, you're probably not going to end up with babies that are pure yellow and blue. I mean,
Yeah.
they get a lot of their looks from that sire side.
Yep.
So, I mean, you better make sure
It's
he's looking like what you want, or you're going to be disappointed. And then the people that are buying them off of you are going to be disappointed as well. If you're going out and you're advertising it as a yellow body
the
blue bar,
it's like I
it's
got a yellow body blue bar for you.
yeah, that's a rainbow.
Yeah. It kind of like the analogy for people who know the ball python market. It's like if you took a pastel and you bred it to a normal and you got a normal and you bred it and you're like, it could be pastel.
Yeah,
It's like, no, you can't. Like, it's not pastel. It's like, come on, dude. Like, you can't. It if it's not yellow, it's not going to produce yellow.
no,
It can. It's a rare event. Like, there's always a possibility of any outcome, right? Like a yellow chameleon can produce a red one 1% of the time. Like, so it could happen. It's not like a total lie, but it's definitely very unlikely.
it's unlikely, and it's setting up your customer base to not trust you. Like if you keep building everything off of lies and just kind of telling people what they want to hear, then you're not going to be successful in the
Yeah.
long run. I mean, if I get something and I think there's going to be a lot of rainbows in it, like with this last clutch that I had, I told people, I'm like, I think that they're going to lean this way, but they could also go in this direction. But I had a lot of people with this one. They weren't really looking for so much like breeders as I had a lot of people looking for pets. So
Yeah.
it was more like I was just more getting the
It's like,
question of,
is it healthy? Is it
is it going to
eating?
be, yeah,
Like,
is it healthy? What's it eating? When did it hatch? And,
yep.
is it going to be colorful?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Check,
it's going to have colors in it. I just right now I can't guarantee if it's going to be one way or the other. I mean, I definitely had some when they were younger. I mean, I looked at them and it's like, all right, you're going to have a lot more yellow than what I need. And the male that I ended up holding back, his giveaway to me was his chin, like the underside of his chin. I mean, he just had just those red and blue, just from it was real early on. I noticed them, and that's when I kind of put him aside. I was like, all right, we're gonna put you over here just to see.
On the animals that I've seen that have gone all red, they start out in the gular, then they gets into the chest, and then it goes back from there to their hips, right? And some of them it'll stop like halfway. Some that just keeps going, right? And it's really tough. But at least if you get a nice bright gular early on, that's definitely a good sign. How about the difference between the first clutch from a female and the second clutch from a female?
I noticed with mine. Well, are you talking like the retained clutch after?
So there's a couple different dimensions to that. One is hatch rates and growth rates and health. The other is how much you know about what the outcomes could be.
I know with mine, with her second clutch, it definitely wasn't as fertile as her first. It ended up being a lot smaller too. I want to say off the top of my head, it was only, I want to say, I believe the first clutch she laid was like 22, and then I think the second one she laid 15. But I had a horrible like amount of like infertile eggs in that. I want to say I only had like 4 or 5 eggs that ended up being good that I raised after that. And then even the babies when they came out, they weren't. I don't want to say they didn't thrive, but they definitely needed a little more help than the other ones.
Than the first group, yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah, that's pretty common. Like the retained clutch just seems to be a little bit weaker than the first clutch. The other thing that I find really important was with a female. Say you're on her fourth clutch, and now that first clutch is a year old. How much information is that? Like, how useful is that information for you as a breeder and your customers?
I like being able to like look back on that first clutch, and you kind of, I mean, by the time they're a year, I mean you know kind of what you have, like what you're dealing with, and then I mean I think with her she just laid her second like official clutch, so I'm hoping these ones come out even better than the first. I mean it's the same male in there, so I think it'll still be like the same kind of mix. Like I don't think I'm gonna, but I'm hoping to have more holdbacks from that one, and I'm gonna really pay attention to the females this next time around, and then so I can bring another male into the mix to start working with them.
Cool, man. So, what are some of the things you look for when you're selecting your animals? I know you've mentioned the red gular on the guy that you were hoping to be red.
Yeah, I look for like size. I'm looking for the animals that are just getting bigger, faster. Not necessarily like, I don't want anything that's like super, super big, but I like making sure that they have a little more size than the clutch mates, because all that passes down as you're breeding them. Looking for like the bigger animals and everything, so you bring a little more size into your project. I like looking for ones that are like that have a real good feeding response. I like aggressive feeders. Just I like to make sure that their overall structure is good. Like, I don't want something with like a small head, a big body, and vice versa. And I don't
like
want
funky shaped tail.
Yeah, I don't want anything with a funky shaped tail or any kinks or anything like that. I want the genetically superior animals out of
Yep.
those clutches to keep working with.
Do you try to find the puppy dog in the mix?
No, not really. I mean, all of my
Okay.
like my male that I breed with. I mean, he is not a puppy at all. I mean,
Yeah.
he's not like aggressive, but he's just I like to look for the typical chameleons where they don't really like anybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
Most of mine, they don't like people. They don't like seeing other lizards. If I'm down there, I'm working with something else I have down there, and I walk past the cage sometime, and they just get all huffy and puffy just because they see something else.
Yeah. I personally like the ones that give me a little attitude. Um, because that means I'm going to get a better spectrum of color from them. The ones that are super relaxed all the time, you just get one shade, and that's the chilled out state, like chilled out phase. They're never gonna show you any other color
Mm-hmm.
except for chilled out colors, which in Panthers are generally not as nice. Um, and so for me, I'm like, I like the one that's gonna posture, defend his turf, and he's gonna show off the colors
Mm-hmm.
on a regular basis, right? I want to see that. Um, the other thing I really like about it from a behavior standpoint is if he doesn't do it, if he doesn't try to like kick me out of his cage and defend his tree, I know something's up. I'm like, hey, there's something wrong. I need to like figure out what it is. Try to fix it before it gets worse. Whereas with that puppy dog, like you're never going to get any hints, and he's just going to chill out on the branch until it's too late, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the thing. I personally really like the fact that it gives you information about their health. It means they're going to show you their colors regularly rather than it being like once in a lifetime thing. Um, and uh, I just I'm also a snake guy, and I like a snake that defends itself. I like a snake that does normal snake things, just like with a
Mm-hmm.
chameleon. I want a chameleon that does normal chameleon things. I like that. Like I like the animal for what it is.
Yeah.
Uh,
I I had a male for a little while. I mean, he was in the beginning. I thought it was awesome because he'd always want to come out, be held, and everything like that. But then I found once he got to breeding age, he was too much of a pushover. Like when I tried to introduce a female to him, he didn't have it in him. He just never showed interest. I tried throwing, I think it was at least two different females at him, and he just didn't want anything to do with it. And then
yeah,
all my other ones that were a little more wild and, like you said, cage defensive and everything. I mean, I put the female in, they knew exactly what to do, and they wanted to do it. And this guy, I mean, he was
yeah,
awesome, but even like you said, like it took a lot of work just to get him to be fired up to know what I was working with.
exactly.
Like all the other
Yeah,
guys, like you said, you walk by and they start posturing and they start strutting around showing their stuff. And this guy, it was, I mean, I had to pull every trick that I
trick in the
could
book. Yeah,
just to get him to go a little bit. And it's like, all right, I think he's got some of the qualities that I want, but
yeah.
then he never took to any of the females that I had, so I passed him along. I was
Yep.
like, he'll make a great pet.
Yep. And from a practical breeding standpoint, anybody who's tried to take pictures of chameleons knows that it's extremely difficult.
Oh
Um,
God.
and so if you have those animals that are like little puppy dogs, they are terrible for pictures. Like
Mm-hmm.
they might just sit there hugging the log, never show any color, just like sit there black, and then maybe they'll like pivot on the log and be like, "Don't look at me."
Mm-hmm.
Um, and you're like, "That's a terrible picture. Like how like no one is ever gonna want this chameleon. What am I gonna do?" And
That
so
was the hardest part with the babies, was actually trying to get pictures of that. Like, I mean, I would spend, I feel like, an hour sometimes, and I'd only get two two good pictures out of the 50 or
yeah,
60 that I snapped, and I was only trying to get pictures of. I think at that point, I think I had like 12 to try to send. Oh my God,
yeah.
it
Yeah,
was.
you're like you get them in the right position, and their eyes are like this. You're like, oh
Yeah,
damn it! Like, come on, dude.
yeah.
Yeah. So I feel like that's a side a side benefit of having a normal chameleon is if it postures for you, it's an easy picture.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yep.
like
That's how the guy was that I picked. As soon as I'd get him out, I mean, as soon as you get him on the finger, he's just
he's up. Yeah,
he was just showing you everything that was there,
yeah.
and then
There's
I
no
was,
question.
yeah, there was no question. I'm like, you're the one.
Cool, man. So the other one of the things I'm curious about, so it's kind of a selfish question, is what are some of the big questions that you personally would like to answer about Panther chameleon genetics?
One of the things that I was wondering was if we know, or if there's a way that we could find out like how many generations deep we have to go with selective breeding until you get until it's I'm trying to think of the way to say this, until you can predict a little more easily like what you're gonna get. Like if I have to go 5, 6 generations out, and then whichever animals I pick from that, I'm gonna get the yellow body blue bar or the red body blue bar. I mean, to me, that's something that I would like to know. I don't know if it's possible to get to that point, but
So there's a way to do it right now with math, um, where you essentially assume a 50-50 mix between two animals. And so you say, okay, sire is 50% of the information, roughly speaking. Um, and then the next sire is 50% of what's left. So two sires on the female side will give you 75% confidence. And that's like, uh, if you flip a coin two times, the chances that you're going to get two heads and tails, that's hitting on what you want, but two tails is hitting what you don't want. So it's like, of those four outcomes, one of them is what you don't want when you're at 75%. And then the next male up on the female side, so going dom sire, doms dom sire, doms doms dom sire, that one gets you to 87.5% because you're cutting that remaining piece of information in half again, and each time you're just cutting it in half. So to get above 90% confidence on the female side, you'd need four of your doms sires on up that side of the lineage.
oh, right.
I wrote a blog about it.
Yeah. I'll
Um,
have to go back and read that one.
yeah, it's a selective breeding blog, but basically explaining the prior probabilities. That's like the way that I think about that is like that's your prior expectation for when you pair them together. This is what you expect.
Mm-hmm.
But the prior probability, say you have a 90% chance of yellow because you've dug up that many sires on the female side, and the sire that you're working with is actually yellow, which is a big question, because most people don't look at the details on that. If you have a really nice yellow male, and then you can get to 90+% prior expectation for that female, you put those together, you can be pretty confident at the outcome. But that's just the prior distribution or the prior estimate for what you're going to get. The real thing is what matters. And so that's why once you're on the second, third, fourth, fifth clutch, you're starting to get more certain about the real genetics in that female. So you first, you got an estimate, you got a guess. You pair them up, you have the first clutch, now you have real information. Second clutch, you have even more real information. Third clutch, and it keeps getting better as you have more clutches with that one female, because you might now be up to like 40 or 50 males, right? And that number of males, then you can start to say, okay, of those 50 males, 40 of them were what I wanted and 10 were not. So now you've dropped from what you thought was like 90 down to 80. But that 80 is much more accurate than your guess based on the lineage.
Mm-hmm.
So from a selective breeding standpoint, that's the information that you have, and the math, like the math behind it is essentially like you can cut the information in half as you walk up the female's lineage, but then once you get actual outcomes from the males that are her sons, you start to update that estimate with real outcomes. And so that's why I share a ridiculous amount of lineage first, so you can estimate it yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And then second, I publish every gallery of siblings so that you have real information to estimate what's in that female as it goes forward. And I feel like those two things are what we need to be able to have that confidence about what you're going to produce and what you're getting as a buyer. Those two pieces of information, like number one, detailed lineage, number two, siblings, because that's the real thing at the end of the day. Because like there's a lot of this, and this is classic old school Panther breeders will they'll look you up and down. They'll be like, Michael, you like reds, don't you? And they're gonna find all those red pictures that they got in their phone, and they're gonna shoot them over to you and be like, this female is from this lineage.
Yeah.
Right. And that's like the classic reason that there's all these crazy ideas about what type of outcomes you can get. It's because people are just fabricating lineage, not being transparent about sibling outcomes. Like when I don't hit on a clutch, and when you don't hit on a clutch, when honest breeders don't hit on what they're trying to do, they tell everybody. They say they're rainbows, dude. Like,
yeah,
I don't, they weren't yellow. I can't. There's nothing I can say. Like if you want a rainbow, get one of these females, but they're not gonna be yellow. Whereas there's a lot of people out there that are still pushing those as yellow buddy blue bars. And so that to me is like what we need to do as at the hobby level, is get rid of that old school mentality of just like making a sale, looking people up and down and giving them what they want to hear. And get to that point where we're actually sharing real results.
Well, it just hurts you in the long run too if you start lying early on about what you're gonna produce and everything, or what you are producing. I mean, to me, it's not worth it. You got to be truthful with what people are gonna get from you, or
yeah, man,
they're not gonna come back. And word of mouth spreads now. I mean, faster than it ever has.
Than it did before. Yeah, if it was all on the phone, Yeah. Now it's not that way.
No. Everything, it's so easy to hop on social media and you're done. And I mean,
Yeah.
some people might not care. I feel like some people start breeding stuff just because they want to make that quick buck.
Yep.
Go in, do what you
Yep.
can, and then get back out as quick as you can. But if you want to stick around and do it for a while, you gotta own up to
Get
stuff that doesn't work out.
yeah. Tough it out.
Yeah, not everything's gonna be a success.
Yeah. And I think one issue that we haven't touched on yet, and it comes up a lot, is cross locale animals. So similar kind of idea is like you could be shooting for a specific phenotype, a specific color combination, or you could be more focused on just the locale itself, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think most people have a combination of the two goals. How do you think about locale, and how do you identify animals that you're like not comfortable with from a locale standpoint?
I mean, I don't think people. I think people can cross them if they want to, but it's not something that I'm ever going to be interested in.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, you really gotta just. I mean, you gotta trust who you get and everything from, and then you really. I mean, you can some of the crosses. I mean, you can see them like when you look at the animal. I mean, it's just obvious. Like you just look, and it's just a mix. It's a mix up
It's
of
trying to
everything.
be four things at once. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's
It's
just not. I mean, I have a male like that I took in from someone who was leaving, and he told me that it was an ambilobi. And as soon as I looked at it, I'm like, no,
that's not
I'm like,
Bolivia.
that's not. I'm like the bars aren't there. I mean, that's he's a lot bigger than my like all my other stuff that I know is ambilobe. I mean, he's just it's just
Yeah.
his size. I mean, his
The
colors
color
are all
quality.
needed. The,
Yeah.
the the quality's not there. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah. The thing I see is it's like artificial red rain is a common thing. You'll see also like white spots, or you see body bar combinations that are grainy.
mm-hmm,
It's like in a pure locale animal, they often have smooth transitions,
mm-hmm,
right? You have you can have color that bleeds right onto another color, but it's often a smoother transition in a wild type panther. Whereas with a cross, it's like it's trying to be four different shades of blue all in one place, or like because often in one locale you have one shade of blue, and in another locale you have another shade of blue,
mm-hmm,
and the same for ambilobe. You have like one shade of yellow and another shade of yellow outside of ambilobe, and if you put those different shades together, often you get these really kind of weird things when those are clashing colors, right? So like you throw like red and blue into the same animal, and it almost looks like it has red rain and it's blue, and it's weird. Like there's something weird about those crosses, and you can look at a lot of like Florida wildcaughts to identify those patterns. It's like just look at Florida wildcaughts all day, and then eventually you're like, as soon as you see something that resembles that, you're like, it's a cross. Like,
yeah,
but I think if you get into the details of like what it is, it's that an animal trying to be multiple things at once. Like you can see the fact that on the body it doesn't know whether it's white, yellow, green, orange. Like it's like all of them at once. And in a pure locale animal, that's just not possible. Like they don't have that many color options. and and the same for their bars and other things. Like sometimes you'll have a lot of crosses. You have the bars disappearing, just kind of all just one brown mess. Um,
mm-hmm.
so, but there are some people who do a great job with it. I'm not going to hate on it entirely. I'm just saying that, like, as far as identifying crosses, often that's the type of thing I'm looking for. There are some really tastefully done crosses, right? Like I've seen some from, let's say, for example, West Coast Chameleon Brothers. Some of those crosses, I've seen them, and I'm like, geez, that's amazing. Like
Mm-hmm.
some of his white hybrids. I'm a huge fan of that white hybrid project, but it's stated as a white hybrid project, right?
Yes. Yeah, as long as as long as you're being truthful with what you're doing, and someone wants to buy that, and they're not looking for a something to put into a breeding project, then
Mm-hmm.
I mean have fun, mix all
Yeah,
the palettes and everything like that, but just they just need to make sure that they let everyone know what's going on,
yeah, be
just
cool
so
about it.
just so the market doesn't get flooded, or you have one person going in with they want to do a few, just even if they just want to do a clutch and try it out, but that's all it takes is you get
Yeah,
that out there, and it's, oh yeah, they're Ambelobi, or they're Ambanja, or whatever. It's like,
whatever you want to hear.
just 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 say what they are, so
Yeah,
then everyone else knows,
yeah.
because
I think that this question overlaps with the way that a lot of people get started, right? So a lot of people get started too fast, way too fast.
mm-hmm.
And before they've even produced their first pure locale clutch, they're crossing locales. And if they do that, they haven't established a reputation, they don't have any infrastructure, and they've already crossed locales. They are in for a huge challenge. I mean, like I more power to you if you do it right and you stay honest and true through the process. But that's going to be really hard. Like it's going to be like it's already difficult enough to sell really well done pairings of a pure locale animal,
Mm-hmm.
and people don't have that base expectation of like, hey, this is going to be really hard, and so they think, oh, I'm going to be able to sell all these for $300-400, and I'm going to be in the money after my first year, like whatever their dreams are, and um, they're just not ready. They're not prepared, and
Yeah.
so once those crosses are sitting there and not selling, and they don't have the infrastructure, they don't have the money, they're in debt out their ears because they're not going to be digging themselves out of that hole until year 3 on average is what I've seen. Um, it's like, well, now they're pure locale animals because they are in such a rough spot that
They just need to get rid of them, and
they've just got to move them. And it's like they might from the beginning think they're going to be totally honest, and they may have good intentions and all this, but the real questions that they're going to have to answer, and like, are they going to really just carry that debt for a lot longer, or are they going to move them? And I think that the problem with people getting into crosses too early is that not many people can just like burn money. Like
yeah,
they most people are thinking they're going to make money, and if they are trying to do that, it's like it's not gonna help.
yeah, no, not not at all. It's like you said, it's tough enough moving stuff from a good pairing. I mean, I learned that thankfully with my first clutch, I had a lot of people that they kind of followed along from the beginning. The little
Yeah.
bit that I did on social media with it, they kind of followed along, and hey,
Mm-hmm.
let me know when they're ready. And so then we took everything to private messages, and I was messaging them and everything like that. But I think with this first go around, I think it was 14 that I had to find homes for. And I mean, then that was tough. And I had
That was
I
about the
I
number that I
felt like
had on
I
my first
had
group.
the genetics behind them. I mean, I was happy with the pairing, and it
Mm-hmm.
was it was tough. Once I ran out of those people that were following from the beginning, it got real tough to move them.
Yeah.
And, I mean, I feel like I was very lucky to be able to move them in the time frame that I did, and not have a bunch left over that I had to then find homes for, or just find room at my house for, setting up more tanks. And because right now I don't have the infrastructure to hold on to them for much past like 5-6 months.
Yep.
Which I'm like, as my clutches go, I've just been reinvesting back in everything, upgrading my cages where I could, and kind of learning from mistakes from the first one, what worked, what didn't. And
Yep. More juvenile cages.
Yep.
Yeah. That's going to be important. It's like, because the main thing as someone who's interested in, selective breeding, is as you're trying to hold a group to see what's in it, and then you actually have to move some at the same time just to pay the feeder bills and the electricity bill. You're going to realize, like, oh geez, I need those. I need more of those juvenile size cages. I think that's a huge thing. It's like people plan for the 3-month hold, and they think they're going to be able to sell them at 3 months. It's like, no, you're not. Yeah. These days I'm seeing most clutches taking more like 5 to 7 months, And before the pandemic, there was like 2020 was a great year. I was able to move almost everything before 4 months, but now it's more like 5 to 7. This is pretty much what you need to plan for.
Yeah, but
you can move a few right in the beginning, like the people that have been waiting 8 months, and then you're going to be like, the last male is going to go, a lot later than what you like what people think, because they think, oh, I can move everything at 3 months. Nope.
Yeah, I've been talking to some people like that, and they were all excited to hit that 3-4 month mark. And then I kind of got a hold of them, like, a few weeks later, I see them posting up and kind of advertising them, and it's like, hey, how's it
going?
How's that going? Like, everyone's, like you said. I mean, I was even in that boat too, where I had I'm going to get them, and by 3 months, they're going to be gone. And that didn't work like that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like it is the minimum that they can go out, but the problem is that, and as the market is the way that it is you've got people sitting there with 7-month-old chameleons. And if someone is shopping around and they look at the 3-month-old versus a 7-month-old, it's night and day. And so there's kind of this, as the market gets saturated, it makes it even less likely for that 3-month animal to move at all. Because there's so many of those animals in the 5 to 7 month range for people to choose from, that there's not as many of those 3 months going out. But yeah, cool, man. So how about we've been talking for about an hour, and we can probably wrap it up with any of your favorite sources of information. Books, podcasts, blogs, maybe.
Podcasts. I mean, I got to go with Bill at the Chameleon Academy. I mean, whatever you want to know, he most likely has an episode on it. And just the way that he relays out the information, I mean, everything's super relatable. It's really easy to follow, and it's some of the best info out there. I mean, I try to stay on top of everything that you post. Whether it's just little information about your breeders, or like the studies that you put out, like when you were posting about the genetic testing. I followed along with that. I was real interested in that, to see how that went.
Cool, man.
Books, I don't really go for. I feel like a lot of them are just out of date, especially with all the social media and like the internet and everything. With, I mean, you can still get bad information on the internet, um, but
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then one of the things I tend to avoid are a lot of the like chameleon groups on like Facebook and stuff. Like I go on there, I kind of look. I don't really post that much. I'll kind of try to help someone out, but I mean, it's just to me it like a lot of those Facebook groups. It just seems like whoever created the group wants to tell you how to do everything, even
Yeah.
when they don't
Yeah.
know like themselves, and they're basing all their information off of the like the one that they have. And I start posting up stuff that like Bill talks about in a podcast, and then everyone's telling me that I'm wrong. So those I
That's
tend,
because you are Mike.
yeah.
That's yeah.
I mean, I'm obviously doing everything wrong. I mean, if I
Yeah.
listen to those groups, everything that I do with mine, I'm doing wrong. They
Yeah.
shouldn't be living in hybrid cages, and
Oh, all
yeah,
screen, all screen.
it's
Give it a water cup. Where's the water cup, Mike?
oh yep, the water cup and the you need the little waterfall in there too.
Yeah. No, I know what you mean, man. I think that I generally see Facebook and Instagram and stuff as just a way of meeting people,
Mhm.
and people are messy. People are you know, people are fun. If you can laugh at yourself and laugh with them, then you get to a point where it kind of rolls off. But um, but yeah, a lot of those spaces are kind of little fiefdoms of the admins. I I do some adminning myself, but primarily like more in like a bat signal type thing. If somebody tags me, I'll be like, oh, okay. And they jump in
Mhm.
there to engage in a conversation where I get tagged, but I'm not like scrolling through and looking for stuff. Um, for the most part, I'm just waiting for somebody to tag me and then I'll jump on. Um, and for the most, I think also though, the big thing with those groups is even when you see like you're going to see some stuff that like makes your heart sink. Like, oh God,
Mhm.
like not again. And that it's like emotionally draining. That's what I find it to be the most difficult thing is like you just see the same mistakes over and over. Like where is this stuff coming from? But um, the 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 thing that I do enjoy is when you do work at it with somebody and you get them to a place where they turn things around and the chameleon starts to look great. You can see the results of the work. You muscle through it. You set your ego aside while they badger you about your hybrid cages and
Yeah.
like find opportunities to maybe make a difference in the world, right?
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, I always try to if people are like if they're posting up about a problem and everyone's kind of just throwing the same stuff, like the screen cages, this and that. I mean, I'll go and I'll send
yeah.
them a message, and I'll just be like, look, like you need help with this, I'm more than happy to talk you through it off
Yep.
of the Facebook group, and I kind of tell them I'm like, like why don't you go take an afternoon, go listen to some of Bill's stuff, listen to
Yep.
him talk
Yep.
about it, and just kind of make your own judgment from there. I mean, if you want to go
Yeah.
back to the Facebook group, that's what you want to do, go for it. But I mean, I'm always trying to help people, send them in the right direction, and
Mm-hmm.
more so just for the animals. I mean, I hate going on those and you see something that's on death's doorstep and it could have been prevented. And I mean, that's between that and then I find another thing that's disheartening too is when you try to help someone and
And they aren't listening.
they don't listen or they take it as like a personal attack, and it's like I'm not attacking, I'm just trying to make sure that you do it right. And I feel like maybe some of that is, I mean, when I started learning about a lot of this stuff, I mean, it was like the old forum days, and some of those things were like the Wild West when it, yeah, you came to ask a question and you just got told flat out, like there was no sugarcoating on anything. But I feel like some people need to hear that just to get them going in the right direction.
Yeah.
And
cool, man. Well,
yeah.
I'm excited to talk to you again in 5 years when you're getting the bat signal and I can sit on the sidelines.
Yeah.
That's that will be a great time. So
I'm working towards it.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I'm really glad that you were able to set some time aside to have this conversation. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to the future, man.
Thank you. It was awesome being here.
Cool. And before we wrap up, just give people some information about where they can reach you, what they can do to get in touch if they want to know more about your project.
They can go right now. I just started a Facebook page. It's just Mike's Chameleons. It'll come up right on. I'm still in the beginning stages of it, kind of going back through this last clutch that I had, and I'm getting up all the pictures of, you know, both sides of it, the doms and the sires and the eggs and the babies coming up, and I'm going to be going through and keeping updating with that. I'm gonna I'll have an Instagram page with the same name as well. I'm in the process of doing that, and then I set up a Gmail as well, which is just Mike'sChameleons@gmail.com. So if anyone wants to email me with any questions or what's coming down the line as far as, you know, clutches and everything like that, I'm more than happy to answer any questions there, or Facebook, you know, Facebook Messenger and all that stuff.
Cool. Sounds great, man. Well, I hope you have a good night.
I hope you